Narayana namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayet. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we are beginning the discussion on chapter 8 of the third canto, which is the manifestation from Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. The manifestation from Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu is a narration of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is actually the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam as being narrated by Sri Maitreya Rishi to Vidura. Sri Maitreya Rishi was a disciple of Sri Parashara, and Parashara Muni was the father of Srila Vyasadeva. And Sri Parashara heard Srimad Bhagavatam, and through Sri Parashara Muni, Sri Maitreya Rishi, heard the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that is being narrated between him and Sri Vidura. Now, one of the most important aspects of this narration that is beginning at this time is for us to understand the power of intention, the power of intention of the Supreme Lord. It is the power of intention of the Supreme Lord, because the statements, or rather the instructions of the Lord, carry potency. And the statements of the Lord, when they are being carried out or taken into heart by anyone, that carries potency for us to be able to execute duties on behalf of the Lord. So we glorify Srila Rupa Goswami Pad, the chief amongst the six Goswamis. We glorify him as Sri Caitanya Manovishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadatti Swapadantikam. We glorify him as carrying the desires and being able to reveal and execute the desires of Lord Chaitanya. Who could understand the heart of Lord Chaitanya? Who has the ability to understand the heart of Lord Chaitanya? It's unimaginable. It is said that a Vaishnava's heart cannot be understood. Now, this is Lord Chaitanya. How could we understand the heart of Lord Chaitanya? But Srila Rupa Goswami carried the desires of Lord Chaitanya in his heart. The desires of Lord Chaitanya were personally spoken to Srila Rupa Goswami, and he carried these desires in his heart. And we are Rupanugas. We are following in the tradition the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami and the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami. Everything we have today has come from the desire of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as revealed to Srila Rupa Goswami. Now, what is very important for us to understand is that when the Lord makes a desire known, then that desire practically carries the potency of the Lord. So when the Lord said that his name would be spread to every town and village, that statement carries power. All the potencies of the Lord are carried in the statements made by the Lord, because the statements of the Lord and the Lord are non-different. So Lord Chaitanya made a statement to Srila Rupa Goswami. He made a statement to his devotees, as shared in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhagavad, Chaitanya Bhagavad, that his name would be spread to every town and village. It will be broadcast to every town and village. Now, this particular statement carries potency, and those who take this particular statement seriously will have the ability to execute that statement. Now, what is the statement? That his name would be known in every town and village. His name is being broadcast through the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So when the Lord said his name would be known in every town and village, he is also referring to the broadcast of the teachings of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is a sum total of all the teachings of the Goswamis. It contains all the teachings of the Sandarbhas of Srila Jiva Goswami, all the 6 Sandarbhas. The extraordinarily complicated literature authored by the Goswamis and their realizations are all being captured in very simple Bengali by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he was instructed by Lord Nitai. Lord Nityananda instructed him to go to Vrindavan. He appeared in a dream and he instructed him, go to Vrindavan and take the association of the devotees in Vrindavan. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami practically left the next day from Bengal and traveled to Sri Vrindavan Dham, and he began associating with the devotees of Lord Caitanya in Vrindavan. And very specifically, he associated with Srila Jiva Goswami Pad. Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, they collaborated immensely in producing a lot of literature. So he gathered a lot of information from the different Goswamis of Vrindavan, and he understood the essence of the writings of Srila Jiva Goswami, the Sandarbhas. The Sandarbhas themselves are very, very technical, but very lucid, elaborate presentation on the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the conclusions of Srimad Bhagavatam as taught by Lord Caitanya. Lord Chaitanya's conclusions of Srimad Bhagavatam touches upon three topics. One of them is Sambandha Gyan, the other is Abhideya, and the third is Prayojana Tattva. So Lord Caitanya divided, and his followers divided the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam into three different parts. The teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam are also divided into three different parts. One, that which gives Sambandha, which is that which establishes a relationship of the Jiva to Krishna. Then there is Abhida or Abhideya. Abhideya is bhakti. Once Sambandha is known, once one understands the relationship with Krishna and develops loving emotions, they are Bhava Bhaktas, they develop prema towards Krishna, because once you reach the point of understanding who you are in relationship with the Lord, then you fall in love with him. Then the loving emotions begin from Sambandha Gyan. When the Sambandha itself is complete, then there's perfect bhakti. That perfect bhakti is called Abhideya. Now, it doesn't mean that Abhideya doesn't exist in the beginning for the practitioner. So the very first Krishna conscious practitioner who comes in within a year, who is being taught to read Srimad Bhagavatam, who is being taught to chant Harinam, who is being taught to worship the deity at any different level, is basically developing Sambandha Gyan. But their Abhida or Bhakti is proportionate to the level of Sambandha. If Krishna Sambandha is complete, then Abhideya Bhakti is complete. Because when Krishna Sambandha is complete, then one has fallen in love with Krishna. Yeah, only one who loves another would be able to completely understand the person, which is just very, I would say, even though you can't, I would say, analytically make this statement in terms of reaching conclusions analytically, this is the truth, that if you love someone very, very deeply, then you understand them. So as a consequence, when Sambandha Gyan is complete, then quite naturally, Bhakti is complete, because Abhida, which is the execution of devotional service, is also complete because of the fact that one knows who their Lord is. And then Prayojana Tattva itself is to be able to fall in love. This is basically the goal of Krishna consciousness. The goal of Krishna consciousness is to taste prema. It is to taste and chant in prema. So our business starts with Anartha Nivritti, where we just do not know who we are. We have set multiple goals for ourselves based on the body, and we are pursuing these goals, and these goals are distorting our real nature. But as Sambandha increases, and Sambandha increases by coming in touch with Krishna, we come in touch with Krishna through Nama Naminoho Abhinnatvam. Krishna's rasa flows fully in Nama Naminoho Abhinnatvam. One can know Krishna completely through Nam. So one who is chanting Harinam has the ability to know Krishna completely. Nama Naminoho Abhinnatvam. one who comes in touch with sadhus who carry Krishna in the heart. The Guru carries Krishna in the heart and has deep sambandha with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada carried his sambandha around the world. He carried his sambandha, he carried his separation from Vrindavan in his heart. And he distributed this separation, he distributed this sambandha throughout the world. Yeah, because when one falls in love, then one experiences very deep separation from the object of love as they move away from it. So when one moves away from Sri Vrindavan Dham and wants to go around the Western world, the Western world in many different ways are atheistic representations of culture, simply because no one knows who God is. They may be interested deep within their jivas, but at the same time, there isn't the level of knowledge or the depth of knowledge for them to fully understand and live according to the desires of the Lord. So as you move closer from Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada carried his separation. He was in deep separation from the Dham, and he carried this separation. And then through his preaching, through his chanting of Nam, the separation from Vrindavan was experienced by the jivas in the parks of New York City, in the roads and subways and so on and so forth, as he carried the separation and distributed the separation, because the jiva doesn't even understand that he is separated from Krishna. Only Lord Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can understand. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can understand, Krishna cannot understand. Krishna cannot understand separation because he is with Srimati Radharani. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can understand separation because Radharani, the mood of Radharani is carried by Lord Chaitanya. This is Krishna who is carrying the mood of Srimati Radharani. She is experiencing deep separation from Krishna. That separation is being carried by Mahaprabhu. And in that separation, he is distributing prema because he practically feels deep separation from Krishna because he is Srimati Radharani. So if there is something called prema, the maximum extent of prema, that is with Srimati Radharani. And so the maximum amount of bhakti personified is Srimati Radharani. So if there is Abhida and if there is a particular personality who personifies the deepest level of bhakti, it is Srimati Radharani. And Lord Chaitanya is the combined form. He is the combined form. But he is in the mood of Srimati Radharani. And in this mood, he is experiencing very, very deep separation from Krishna. And Lord Jagannath, in Jagannath Puri, he is in very deep ecstasy, but he is experiencing very deep separation from Srimati Radharani. Now, the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri were such that he chose Jagannath Puri because Krishna in Jagannath Puri is in deep separation. And Radharani in the mood, Krishna in the mood of Radharani as Lord Chaitanya was in very deep separation. So he did not stay back in Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, they are together. In Jagannath Puri, Krishna is in separation, and here Radharani is in separation. And Lord Chaitanya danced in separation on the streets of Jagannath Puri when he pushed the cart of Jagannath. All the devotees are bringing Jagannath back to Vrindavan, which is the significance of the Rath Yatra, practically bringing Jagannath back because he desperately wants to come back to Vrindavan. He is in ecstasy, and he is being pulled by the devotees of the Lord back to Srimati Radharani, to Sri Vrindavan Dham. Lord Chaitanya is in ecstasy during Rath Yatras and in Jagannath Puri. Now, this particular mood of separation brings about intense compassion for those who are separated. So this compassion was passed on by Lord Chaitanya to Lord Nityananda, and Lord Nityananda was expressly told for Lord Chaitanya. He was told by Lord Chaitanya, he said, don't come every year to Jagannath Puri. You do not need to come here. Spread the mission in Bengal, spread the mission in different parts. So Lord Nityananda carried this mood of separation, which had transformed itself into compassion from Jagannath Puri all the way to Bengal, and he distributed this compassion on the streets of Bengal, practically begging everyone to take up the chanting of Harinam, which is the reason why Lord Nityananda's behavior became completely maddened with ecstasy, where he used to walk on the road and the prema from him which is the prema of Lord Chaitanya, which is basically Srimati Radharani's separation, which is so intense that Lord Nityananda basically couldn't even contain himself. His behavior was almost like a madman, and he distributed this prema practically to anyone and everyone whom he saw on the road. And this caused tremendous amount of, I would say, spillover ecstasies as he walked on the road in Bengal, as he was just walking, because he was carrying this particular mood of separation. Srila Prabhupada carried this mood of separation to the West. And because this mood of separation was carried, and this compassion, it had transformed itself into compassion, he practically traveled to every town and village, and he spread the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. The most prominent teaching of Lord Chaitanya is the fact that there's only one religion. There aren't multiple religions. There's just one religion, and that is to attain Krishna. And then the jiva has no other business but to attain Krishna. This is the primary teaching of Lord Chaitanya. Now, his teachings themselves are captured in the Sandarbhas. The Sandarbhas themselves are commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Practically everything that has been written by our Gurujan, by the predecessor Acharyas, are derivatives of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in a beautiful, simple language which can't be misinterpreted, captures the essence of everything that the Goswamis of Vrindavan wrote. The Goswamis of Vrindavan wrote complex Sanskrit. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami sat in Vrindavan next to them and wrote everything in Bengali, simple Bengali. It is not complicated Bengali, it's simple Bengali, and did not leave much room for interpretation. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita being spread around the world is how Lord Chaitanya predicted his name would be spread all around the world. The teachings of Chaitanya Charitamrita would be spread all around the world. The teachings of Chaitanya Charitamrita falls in the category of Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana, which is practically the essence of how Lord Chaitanya divided or viewed the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he viewed the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam as creating Krishna Sambandha, which is establishing the relationship between the jiva and Krishna. He viewed the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam as creating, or rather inspiring, deep bhakti, which is Abhideya. And then there are aspects of Bhagavatam which talk about Prayojana Tattva, which is found in the more confidential aspects of dealings in the 10th canto. Now, between the 1st and the 10th canto, we have spoken about this before. As a devotee proceeds from the 1st to the 10th canto, they also receive the ability to remove their false notions that they have carried from centuries of birth and being in touch with matter and being distorted by being in touch with matter. Because we get distorted by coming in touch with matter. That distortion is being corrected by Nam, by Srimad Bhagavatam, by sadhus who carry Sambandha Tattva, and by coming to the Dham and the deities themselves. So this distortion is being corrected, and this is basically how Chaitanya Charitamrita is being spread. The essence of what I wanted to convey today in the context of what we're discussing in Srimad Bhagavatam is the fact that whatever happens in pure devotional service is simply a manifestation of the desires of higher personalities. Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desired his name would be spread all over. It will happen because he has desired it. His desires and himself are non-different. It carries the potency of Krishna. So Krishna's potency is carried in his statement, is carried in everything that is connected to him. It's non-different. Similarly, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the very confidential servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, predicted that there would be someone who would spread the mission of Lord Chaitanya would be spread all over the world. And that is being seen by Srila Prabhupada's work. And these predictions are happening because Srila Prabhupada believed and carried the faith of these personalities in his heart. And because he wanted to execute this particular mission, he wanted to execute the desire of Mahaprabhu, he wanted to execute the desire of a spiritual master who came in the lineage of Mahaprabhu, whose predecessor was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The potency of the desires of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Mahaprabhu and everybody else is contained within the heart of Srila Prabhupada. As a consequence, he practically became an instrument who practically demonstrated that the will of the superior acharyas, the will of the previous acharyas, the predecessors, would be carried out. It would happen. It is immaterial. It would just happen. It is a matter of whether we have the ability to take on that will upon our shoulders and receive empowerment. Empowerment is a matter of being able to carry out the will of the predecessors. We have to understand the desires. Making an attempt to understand the desires and then carrying out their will practically makes one an instrument. And then one is able to proceed further. Because in all we are doing is we are basically trying to execute the will of the predecessor acharyas, which is what is being demonstrated. Yeah. Now, how do we see it being demonstrated by Srila Prabhupada's disciples, who are our spiritual masters? We see it being demonstrated in so many wonderful ways. They are trying their very best to carry out Srila Prabhupada's orders under all kinds of conditions. They sacrifice so much on a year-by-year basis. And there's so much to be appreciated by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So much to be appreciated of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, of the amount of endeavor they're putting in being able to establish the will of Srila Prabhupada, because they carry Srila Prabhupada in their hearts and they want to please him, just as he wanted to please his spiritual master. And this particular desire to please automatically brings about great resources in terms of Shakti. When we use the word Shakti, which is basically power and empowerment requires that we align ourselves with those who are powerful. If you align yourself with those who are powerful, then you carry power to do what they desire to do. On our own, we don't have the power to do anything. But if we carry the desire of those who are already very powerful and close to Krishna, then we have the ability to contribute to some level. Now, this is being executed by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. How are we empowered? This is also something that we need to understand. We also need to understand our empowerment. We do not want to think that Srila Prabhupada's mission stopped with becoming one pure devotee, which is the misconception carried by some other outfits who practically say that Srila Prabhupada was the last pure devotee. No, if Srila Prabhupada was the last pure devotee, then there was no need for him to travel and distribute the message of Lord Caitanya throughout the world. The message of Lord Caitanya was to make pure devotees all over the world and give an opportunity to practically every jiva. This is Lord Nityananda's potency. Why question the potency of the Lord and limit it to our misconceptions? So we have to understand that our spiritual masters, who are the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, have empowered us. And what is the empowerment which is being given to us? One has to realize that. The empowerment given to us is that when we were initiated, many of you who are initiated, you received the beads from your spiritual master. And when he said you chant 16 rounds and you follow the 4 regulative principles, then he put his desire in that statement. This is the desire of your spiritual master. This is the desire of Srila Prabhupada. This is the desire of the predecessor acharyas, that we chant what has been asked to chant when the beads are being given. The power to chant has already been granted when the beads were given to us. So we already have been given the power to chant when the beads were given to us. The power to chant. When we carry out the instruction sincerely, then the obstacles would be removed, because the instruction has power. The instruction itself has power. This is the power of the predecessor acharyas. This is the will of the predecessor acharyas. Then as we chant powerfully, then we become the carriers of the message of Lord Caitanya. Then we have the opportunity to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. We have the ability to understand Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We have the ability to take risks and chances. My spiritual master, His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, he was giving a joint session several years back in New Vrindavan in West Virginia. And he was sitting with Srila Radhanath Swami and others. And then at that point in time, he made a statement. He said, the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, when Srila Prabhupada was on the planet, took such risks that they wouldn't take these risks if they were to be paid $1 million. They wouldn't take these risks if they were to be paid $1 million. Yeah, in salary. They wouldn't, which means that the kind of risk they took for Srila Prabhupada was done out of love. And that love was so overpowering that they were ready to sacrifice all their comforts, all their desires. These are very young people, and some of them were 18, 19, and some of them were in their 20s. They sacrificed everything, their careers, their jobs, their marriages, whatever you call it. There's been so much sacrifice in just spreading this mission is unprecedented. They were all pioneers, and pioneers blaze through and they create new territory. They also make mistakes here and there because that's the nature of pioneering. That's the nature of pushing forward and representing and creating new frontiers. And we saw a lot of sacrifice done by these great souls. So the desire of Srila Prabhupada is carried by them. And as a consequence, they are passing on the desire to us and they are empowering us through the Harinam chanting. So the point being that our singular purpose is to adhere to the instruction given by the spiritual master whilst we received initiation. This is a singular purpose. There need not be any speculation on whether there's more to do beyond that. He has already given us power. Srila Prabhupada received Harinam, he received the mantra from his spiritual master. He took the words of his spiritual master to his heart and he spread the mission. Lord Nityananda spread the mission by taking the words of Lord Caitanya into his heart. Yeah. So he passed on the culture of taking the instructions and then executing based on compassion. And that requires Harinam. So basically, the point being made here is of two types. One, our power is limited or rather contained within the instructions of the Guru. So the most important instruction of the Guru and the Parampara is to chant and to ensure that we live a lifestyle which is protected so that we can chant nicely. So we should understand both. Yeah, there should be an understanding that the Guru has given us Harinam and he has also instructed us with the power of Harinam, and that his intentions of taking us back to God is contained within Harinam. The Diksha Guru has the ability to place our feet in the spiritual sky. The Siksha Guru has the ability to give us the Abhida or the Bhakti and the impetus for us to be able to move forward towards such a goal. So these are two different tracks, and each of these tracks are as important as the other, where they're being pushed in the direction which is supposed to take us towards Krishna and towards Srimati Radharani's service. But it has already been given. Now, what is the context of discussion here? Because we notice that Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a constant emphasis on parampara. So there is no such thing as I'm self-contained, so I have the ability to speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. You constantly find that Srila Sukadeva Goswami is talking about a conversation between Maitreya Rishi and Sri Vidura. Sri Maitreya Rishi received the Srimad Bhagavatam from his spiritual master, Sri Parashara. Sri Parashara Muni received the Srimad Bhagavatam from his spiritual master, and his spiritual master basically received the Srimad Bhagavatam from the lotus lips of Lord Anantha. Now, who is Anantha? This Anantha, who is in the bottom of the material creation, is also in the spiritual sky. Consider that this material creation is being supported by someone who is also in the spiritual sky, but then they're carrying it on top of their heads. They're practically giving support to the material creation. That is Lord Anantha. So he is also in the spiritual sky, but at the very deep at the bottom. Yeah. So there is the top and the bottom. So Lord Anantha is there. And who is this Lord Anantha? This Anantha is Mula Sankarshana. This Anantha whom we are talking about is Mula Sankarshana. He is Balaram in Dwaraka. So he is Balaram in Dwaraka, who is very intimate with the desires of Vasudeva in Dwaraka. He is very intimate with Krishna's desires. This is the origin of all other Balarams. This is basically Mula Sankarshana, who is the origin of Mahasankarshana, who is the origin of the three Purushas, Karanodakaśāyī Viṣṇu, Kshirodakaśāyī Viṣṇu, Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. So this Anantha is practically Mula Sankarshana. What is his business at the bottom? What is he doing? You see, what is his primary business? His primary business at the bottom is with thousands and thousands and thousands of mouths, he is actually glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam. And as he glorifies Srimad Bhagavatam, again, I want to remark on this. Lord Anantha is glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam, and the sages are receiving Srimad Bhagavatam from Lord Anantha himself, who is Balaram, expansion of Balaram, Mula Sankarshana. And that particular personality is passing on all the details of Krishna's potencies through disciplic succession. So, what we are seeing here is that there is an intention right from Lord Balaram to glorify Krishna, which is being passed on by disciplic succession. So, what we are receiving is the adherence of the will of the predecessors. This is basically how the system works. The system never works as a standalone system. It is a connection that goes back all the way to Balaram, all the way to Mula Sankarshana, who is Ananta, and he is glorifying Krishna with thousands and thousands of mouths. He's practically speaking Bhagavatam and in ecstasy all the time. This is his business. He's glorifying. Yeah. And this particular great personality, Ananta, becomes the origin of speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, which is heard by the Kumaras, Sanat Kumara, the head of the Kumaras. So, along with Sri Narad Muni and others, they leave Satyaloka, and then through a mystical process, they reach Lord Ananta's realm and seek his association as he glorifies Srimad Bhagavatam. So, the knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam, of the process of and the different chapters that we are touching upon, has been received from Lord Anantha to Sanat Kumara, and then from Sri Sanat Kumara to his disciple, from his disciple to Sri Parashara Muni, from Parashara to Sri Maitreya Rishi, from Maitreya Rishi again to Vidura. And then this whole conversation between Sri Maitreya Rishi and Vidura is being captured in context by Sukadeva Goswami. Nobody claims that they know something on their own. This is the parampara system. To be a part of the parampara system, we have to follow the precept given by our gurujans. Follow the precept given by and demonstrated by the spiritual masters. Follow the precept that they carry instructions in their heart and they executed. They were able to carry the instructions of broadcasting the message of Lord Caitanya throughout the world, which was passed on to Srila Rupa Goswami. This is Sri Caitanya Manobhishtam. Srila Rupa Goswami Pad practically removed all restrictions. He said, pass the message on. Do not worry about how it is done. Just pass the message on. So our acharyas practically left India. Yeah, there was a desire in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to preach the West. He practically sent his disciples. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he sent books. Even in advance, he sent the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the West. Yeah, he wrote about and practically conveyed the essence of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and he sent it to the West. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to carry out the instructions, and he sent all the way. He wanted to send his disciples, and he instructed our Prabhupada. And today we are where we are because these were desires of the predecessor acharyas to spread the mission around the world. This was the desire of Mahaprabhu. This was the desire of Mahaprabhu. Why did Mahaprabhu desire that his name to be spread all over the world? What was the purpose of taking the culture of Chaitanya Chaitamrita and giving it to every town and village? What was the purpose? What was the confidence? Where was the confidence? Doesn't the West have Christianity? Doesn't different places have Islam? Don't they have their own different systems which are culturally, which has been coming over? The answer is yes, but then none of them can be broadcast as the singular religion, which practically is the duty of the jiva. If there is any particular duty of the jiva, no religion holds water other than Krishna consciousness. And this has been proven. Otherwise, why would you have devotees from and souls and jivas from different parts of the world being able to take up Krishna consciousness? If this was not true, that every jiva has its connection with Krishna, and every jiva has a singular duty to be able to chant Krishna's names, which is Lord Chaitanya's main message, which is the message of Chaitanya Chaitamrita, then we would not be seeing devotees from the West. This is true because the jiva's business is to do this. The jiva's business is to connect to Krishna, and that's the reason why they could take it up, because it's natural for the jiva to call upon the names of Krishna, regardless of where they were born, regardless of what culture they came from, regardless of what social, economic circumstances they belong to. The business of the jiva is to call upon the name of Krishna. And this is the message of Lord Chaitanya in Chaitanya Charitamrita. But not everybody believed it. Not everybody believed it. No one believed it. Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had very deep desires. He sent so many sannyasis to the West. He sent many teams. They went and they preached to the elite. They preached to the lords and the the ladies in England and in the court of England and different royalty in different parts. They came and they went and they spoke to them. They took pictures and they came back. But it was Srila Prabhupada who practically did what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to be done. He practically took the name of Lord Chaitanya and he broadcast it, and he did exactly what Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda did. He did Harinam. He did Harinam in the streets of New York. He practically made the Western devotees who first came in touch with him do whatever he would have done without considering that they did not have any prior knowledge of Eastern philosophy. Because there was faith in Lord Chaitanya's teachings, that the jiva has only one business, to call upon the name of Krishna. Krishna and the jiva are connected. So there is sambandha, eternal sambandha between Krishna and jiva. So this was faith. This was experience. This was very, very deep faith in Srila Prabhupada's heart on these instructions of Lord Chaitanya. And that faith practically sprouted in what we are experiencing in all these years, plus is nothing but a manifestation of Srila Prabhupada's very, very deep faith in Lord Chaitanya's teachings. This is practically a demonstration that if you carry the instructions in your heart and you act on the instructions, then you will see results, because there's power in the instructions themselves. Now, this is being demonstrated in how the Srimad Bhagavatam has come to us. Lord Anantha speaks, the Kumaras hear, then they pass it on to their disciples, and then through disciplic succession, they do not ever quote, they do not ever misinterpret, they pass on what they hear. This is Shrunvatam Swakata Krishnaha. Shrunvatam Swakata Krishnaha. There's no distortion. They're passing on what they hear. This is what we ought to learn from Srimad Bhagavatam. They're practically adhering and sticking very close to the Gurujana. It is Lord Anantha's desire, with his thousands of heads, Lord Anantha just didn't feel comfortable that he was doing a good job. He wanted millions and millions and millions and millions of heads glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the reason why the Srimad Bhagavatam's message is being carried forward by our movement. In fact, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas have a very specific ownership over Srimad Bhagavat Purana. Yeah, we have a very specific ownership towards the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, because the ownership of Srimad Bhagavatam comes to those who can understand Nam. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is all about the glorification of Harinam. It is about the glorification of the fact that there is no difference between Krishna and his names. And it takes one all the way up to the absolute truth. What is the absolute truth presentation given in the 10th canto? You read Viṣṇu Puran, you will see glorification of Lord Viṣṇu as the maintainer, creator, destroyer, being the origin of the Purushas, etc. You read the other Puranas, you will see the same kind of glorification in terms of their abilities to maintain, create, destroy, to participate in the management of the material universe, and to come to the aid of the devotees in the material universe when there is a need for help, etc. But the most absolute perfect representation is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam amongst all the Puranas. And why is that so? Because the 10th canto contains the most confidential aspects of Krishna's dealings with his dearmost devotees in Vrindavan. Because Vrindavan is the most confidential center of all of the entire universe. In the entire spiritual sky, Vrindavan is the center. This is practically the center. Yeah, Vraja is the center. When we use the word, say, Vraja, this is basically Vrajadam, which includes Nandagaon, which includes Barsana, which includes Govardhan, which includes Sri Radhakund. This is practically the center. Yeah, it is the center. So this is practically the center of the pastimes of Krishna, with the residents of Vraja are the center because they carry all the different mellows. This is practically the center because all the different relationships that can ever be had, all kinds of sambandha can be fulfilled. You can access Ayodhya and Lord Sri Ram's glories from Vrindavan. You can access Ayodhya Dham from Vrindavan. You can access the different Vaikuntha planets from Vrindavan. Vrindavan is the origin. Vrindavan and Krishna and Radharani here are the origin of every other expansion. And if there's practically how you can practically realize everything through coming here to Sri Vrindavan Dham. Everything else is being revealed here in Sri Vrindavan. Ayodhya is present, and the different Vaikuntha planets are present, which means basically that the remaining 9 cantos are contained within the 10th. And the 10th canto is glorified here in Vrindavan in demonstration. The 10th canto is demonstrated here. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas very specifically have ownership over Srimad Bhagavatam. And the reason I'm saying this is that Srimad Bhagavatam is being spoken for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is because the Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas, very specifically Srila Rupa Goswami Pad and the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami, have given us the most intricate aspects of Vraja Prem. They have given us the most intricate aspects of coming in touch with Prema in Vraja. This is not being shared in any other system. Because in Vraja, what is being given here is Vraja Prem, being in come in touch with Krishna here in Vrindavan, is not being shared by any other system. So we have a more complete ownership of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam because we are living for that particular purpose. We are all aspiring someday to be able to taste the mellow of relationship with Krishna here in Vraj. And this is practically the gift of Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta to the rest of the Vaishnava community and to the rest of the world, because this is the pinnacle. You can practically experience every other canto whilst being here in Vrindavan. You can experience it. Yeah, because all the different incarnations are contained within Krishna and Radharani. All of them are contained within Radha and Krishna. They are practically contained and you can access them through the same deities, which means that you can practically have a very demonstrated account of being able to see that the center and the core of and the topmost planet within the spiritual sky is Vrindavan Dham. You can practically see that in the sense that there's practically a demonstration here that everything is accessible. Everything is accessible from here. Now, what is very important for us to realize this is that we have been given this opportunity. We have been given this opportunity to chant Nam, and Lord Anantha is glorifying this to his, his listeners, and he has practically broadcast this. And the same Anantha is Lord Nityananda, so he practically appears and he is broadcasting it. We are practically in the disciplic succession. We are carrying the instructions in our heart. So as we adhere to the instruction of the spiritual master, we will have the ability to carry out the instructions of Mahaprabhu. We should remember that. If you want to play a role in spreading the message of Mahaprabhu, adhere to the instructions of the spiritual master of chanting Harinam. There really isn't anything else which we need to do. Very closely chant Harinam, and you will find that there will be some very special blessing that will allow us to be able to play a role in spreading the mission of Mahaprabhu. Because without Harinam and without the immediate blessings of Srila Prabhupada and the Gurus, then we can't do anything, because we are also a link in the chain. You see, if we want to become a qualified link in the chain, we want to adhere to the being a link. Being a link means being able to cooperate and being able to follow the instructions and being able to form further links down who can again continue the link. This is basically our business, to be able to adhere to the instruction of chanting Harinam. So if there is any one activity which is going to get closer to pleasing Mahaprabhu, because tomorrow is Gaura Purnima, if there's any one activity that is going to help us please Mahaprabhu, which is to spread his mission, for us to be able to glorify his mission, and for us to have the confidence that what he has given belongs to the whole world. It doesn't belong to India. There's really nothing Indian about Krishna consciousness. There really isn't. There was nothing Indian about Srila Prabhupada. There really wasn't. We should understand this. There was really nothing Indian. Yes, the subcontinent geographically has Vrindavan, but then there's really nothing Indian about it. It is actually, it belongs to the entire creation and beyond. So this is basically the message. That is this confidence that this belongs to everyone. And as a consequence, the jiva that we find on the roads is as much a candidate for Krishna consciousness as someone born in Vrindavan even. is the faith that Srila Prabhupada carried. And that's why he was able to spread it, and he did not have any kind of fear in being able to talk and speak the particular message of Lord Chaitanya. Yeah, this is basically the truth. This is how it started. We all know it. Yeah, we all know it. We all have heard about it from so many different sources, have read about it. So this is what we also need to understand, that this chapter practically shows us that Srimad Bhagavatam is a narration through the disciplic succession. And we are seeing that this disciplic succession starts from Lord Anantha himself. And he has maximum authority. He is Sevaka Bhagavan. He is Balaram. He is Mula Sankarshana. He carries all the details of Krishna's pastimes within his heart, and he's glorifying those pastimes. And as a consequence, he's passing on his love for his Lord to the listeners, and through the listeners, he's passing it on to rest of the world. So we have to understand this as well. So let's go through some of the verses, and then we will stop, and then we will perhaps take some questions today. The first verse is verse 8. This is chapter 8, manifestation of Brahmā from Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. The great sage Maitreya Muni said to Vidura, the royal dynasty of King Puru is worthy to serve the pure devotees because all the descendants of that family are devoted to the personality of Godhead. You're also born in that family, and it's wonderful that because of your attempt, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are becoming newer and newer at every moment. Let me now begin speaking on the Bhagavad Purana, which was directly spoken to the great sages by the personality of Godhead for the benefit of those who are entangled in extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. Some time ago, being inquisitive to know, Sanat Kumara, the chief of the boy saints, accompanied by great sages, inquired exactly like you about the truths regarding Vasudeva, the Supreme, from Lord Sankarshana, who is seated at the bottom of the universe. At the time, Lord Sankarshana was meditating upon his Supreme Lord, whom the learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva. But for the sake of the advancement of the great learned sages, he slightly opened his lotus-like eyes and began to speak. The sages came from the highest planets down to the lower region through the water of the Ganges, and therefore the hair on their heads was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped with various paraphernalia by the daughters of the Serpent King when they desire good husbands. There's a much more elaborate description of the glories of Lord Anantha in the 5th canto. There's an entire chapter. But basically, the sages traveled through Ganga, who is, she's flowing from the spiritual sky, and they are in the Satyaloka, they are in Lord Brahma's Loka. They traveled from Satyaloka by mystically entering into the Ganga, which travels all the way down below to Lord Anantha's realm, to Lord Sankarshana's realm. The 4 Kumaras, headed by Sanat Kumara, who all knew the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, glorified the Lord in rhythmic accents with selected words full of affection and love. At that time, Lord Sankarshana, with his thousands of raised hoods, began to radiate an effulgence from the glowing stones on his head. Lord Sankarshana thus spoke the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sage Sanat Kumara, who had already taken the vow of renunciation. Sanat Kumara also, in his turn, when inquired by Sankhya Muni, explained Srimad Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Sankarshana. So the disciplic succession is, it is flowing from Sankarshana, who is Balaram's expansion, Mula Sankarshana, and this is Mula Sankarshana, this is not Mahasankarshana, this is Mula Sankarshana, who is basically the personification of Balaram in Dwaraka. And from there, it is coming to the Kumaras. From the Kumara brothers, Sanat Kumara, it is coming to Sankhya Rishi, who is the disciple. Yeah, and then this is the disciplic succession. The great sage Sankhya was the chief amongst the transcendentalists, and when he was describing the glories of the Lord in terms of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it so happened that my spiritual master Parashara and Brahaspati both heard him. So Sri Parasara, who is the father of Srila Vyasadeva, and Brahaspati is the spiritual master of the demigods, they both sat in the assembly of Sankyayana Rishi. Sankyayana had heard Srimad Bhagavatam from the Kumaras. Now, what is very important for us to realize that this is a narration by Srila Sukadev Goswami of the conversation between Maitreya Rishi and Vidura, and Maitreya Rishi is talking about the glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam that has come to him through disciplic succession. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that there is practically an adherence to great discipline in conveying the message as to who spoke what. That's what we see here in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Sukadev Goswami did not speak the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam directly. He practically quotes the conversation to Parikshit Maharaj. So, which is quite fascinating to see how much they maintain the disciplic succession, how much they are maintaining the links and the authority and where it came from, etc., to establish authority. It's just fascinating how much importance is being given, because Srila Sukadev Goswami could have very easily spoken the 18,000 verses. He could have made it seem as if it came from him, but then he was quoting Maitreya Rishi and Vidura's conversation. Maitreya Rishi practically was quoting his spiritual master. Everybody is remembering their source, their spiritual masters. So it's very fascinating to see how much dependence there is in actually becoming successful in being a broadcaster of the prophecy of Lord Caitanya. If you want to broadcast the prophecy of Lord Caitanya, one needs to know that they are very insignificant and they're dependent on the mercy of the spiritual master. This is the mood carried by Srila Prabhupada. This is the mood of everyone who has ever been successful in a movement. And this goes back to all the way to the narrators of Srimad Bhagavatam, that they always remembered their spiritual masters because that is where they received their mercy. This particular disciplic succession, adherence to dependence on the glories of the spiritual master is just amazing. And what is fascinating to see is sometimes you see the disciple, doing amazing things more than even the spiritual master. It's fascinating to see that. For example, Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, he was a renunciate, and at the same time, he had no other disciple other than Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur broadcast the message to 60,000. I think he had so many thousand disciples around India, in the Gaudiya Math. He had established Gaudiya Math centers around. And then he basically gave mercy to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada established 108 temples. Yeah. So the point being that the disciples carrying the potency of the spiritual master in their hearts sometimes are seen to accomplish a lot more than the predecessors, but in reality, it is because they carry the predecessors in their heart. All the potencies are carried in the heart. Srila Prabhupada practically carried the parampara in his heart, and he was able to deliver the message so beautifully, and he made it so easy for all of us. Yeah, if we are reading things in English and talking in English today, it's because of Srila Prabhupada's glories. It's practically, we can't really conceive of how much has been contributed by him and how much he was helped by his disciples as well. So he never said that he did it. He always acknowledged that he received help. They rendered service. There's no doubt that Srila Prabhupada empowered his disciples, and they basically acted based on the empowerment. However, one has to realize that they made themselves available to Srila Prabhupada. There's a great glory in making oneself available to the spiritual master. Yeah, one can never ever forget the fact that they carry Srila Prabhupada's message, sacrifice so much. So the great sage Sankyayana was a chief amongst the transcendentalists, and when he was describing the glories of the Lord in terms of Srimad Bhagavatam, it so happened that my spiritual master Parasara and Brahaspati both heard him. The great sage Parasara, as aforementioned, being so advised by the great sage Pulastya, spoke unto me the foremost of the Puranas. I shall also describe this before you, my dear son, in terms of my hearing, because you're always my faithful follower. Now, Pulastya Rishi, he is basically the father of the Asuras, the Danavas, the Daityas. Basically, he is the father, or rather, the Asuras come in that particular lineage. From Lord Brahmā to Pulastya to Asuras also come due to that lineage. Now, one day, when Sri Parashara's father was walking in the forest, he came across a king who was so arrogant that he practically um, discredited Parashara's father, and he practically insulted him. So being insulted and being arrogant, being insulted by this arrogant person, Sri Parashara Muni's father curses him to become of demoniac propensity. So the king becomes a demon, and what he does, as any other demon would do, he first thing that he does, he kills the person who actually curses him, because he can't control his demoniac person's propensity. He becomes a cannibal. He practically assaults the sage who curses him, and because of this, Parashara Muni becomes very, very, I would say, angry towards the Danavas and the Daityas and the descendants of Pulastya. Parashara is the grandson of Vasishta, so the personality who was killed by this demon was the son of Sri Vasishta. And Parashara Muni basically starts creating a Vedic sacrifice. And through his Brahmanical potency, he decides to practically annihilate all the demons by bringing them and sacrificing them into the fire. So while he is about to offer oblations to begin the fire sacrifice to practically pull the demons down into the fire and to sacrifice them, Pulastya Rishi approaches him because he is the forefather of the demons. He approaches him and he says, "Don't do it." And then he basically reminds Sri Parashara Muni of the Brahmanical potency of forgiveness. He says, as a Brahmana, we carry the potency of being able to forgive others. So he reminds him of the Brahmanical potency of being able to forgive others. And Sri Parashara then becomes dominated by the Brahmanical potency of forgiveness. And he forgives the Asuras, and Pulastya Rishi, becoming very pleased with Sri Parashara, blesses him with the ability to receive Srimad Bhagavatam, to receive the Bhagavad Purana. So the blessing of Pulastya Rishi practically made Sri Parashara and Sri Bharaspati sit in front of Sankhya Rishi to receive Srimad Bhagavatam, and he had received it from the Kumaras. So this is how the blessing was given, and which is being explained here, that the great sage Parashara, as aforementioned, being so advised by the great sage Pulastya, spoke unto me the foremost of the Puranas, Bhagavatam. I shall also describe this before you, my dear son, in terms of my hearing, because you're always my faithful follower. So Maitreya Rishi is talking to Sri Vidura, and he's saying that I have heard this. So there's always this word about hearing. Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna. Srinvatam seems to be emphasized so much in Srimad Bhagavatam about hearing, because hearing conveys the faith of the speaker into the heart of the listener. There is faith in the sound vibrations. This is Akash Tattva. This is practically how instructions of the spiritual master penetrate into our heart. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya, Chittete Koryaikya. So how does this come into the heart? How does it penetrate the chitta? The chitta is penetrated because there is potency in the words of the Guru that has the ability to penetrate our consciousness and establish knowledge within our hearts and give us blessings. Guru Mukha Padmavakya, Chittete Koryakya. So this is the same principle. So as a consequence, Shanvatam is being emphasized. So those days, it was Shanvatam. They had the capacity to remember 18,000 verses. They had the capacity to remember the Puranas. And the spiritual masters had the capacity to speak. And they practically had the ability to convey the entire substance of their realizations through the sound vibration into the ears of the disciples. This is why Srimad Bhagavatam is to be heard, because if one becomes attached to Srimad Bhagavatam and has the ability to not only do that, to chant Harinam and to read Srimad Bhagavatam, then they have the ability to carry faith. And that faith can be passed on to others and others and others. It's a chain. So here again, you're seeing that Maitreya Rishi is saying that I have heard it, so I'm going to speak to you. So there's so much emphasis on being able to hear and carry out instructions. I'm emphasizing this today. I'm just kind of trying to reiterate the fact that without falling in line with disciplic succession, one cannot serve Lord Caitanya. Tomorrow is Gaur Purnima. We want to dedicate ourselves to our Gurujan. We want to dedicate ourselves to the vows we have taken. Please Go before the Guru Parampara and then redo the vows, practically redo the vows. This is how we become strengthened on Gaur Purnima day. Gaur Purnima is practically going to bring about massive changes to us because Lord Chaitanya, his most munificent, his appearance day, we would be able to receive blessings which are practically unparalleled if we were to seek help tomorrow. So I was just wanting to emphasize that seek help in renewing the vows of Harinam, because with Harinam, we will develop the ability to develop Sambandha Gyan. With Sambandha, we will fall in love. With love, we would surrender. And with surrender, we would have bhakti. And with bhakti, we would then be able to develop prema. The point which I'm trying to make is that we would be able to go towards our goal by first being able to chant. And then through chanting, we receive Sambandha Gyan. As we know more, we fall in love in greater proportion. So the cycle of Sambandha, Videya, Prayojana, it repeats itself more and more. As we make progress each and every year, there should be gradations of improvements in these qualities. But it starts with Shanvatam, it starts with hearing, it starts with understanding that the Guru's words have to be taken as sacrosanct. It's implicit faith in the words of the Guru. The Guru is absolute, he is not relative. You cannot speculate on his intentions. You cannot think of whether the Guru is right or wrong. He is always right. He is always right. He is always right. There's really no difference there. So one has to understand that particular mood and move forward with carrying that mood into their heart. And they have the ability to be develop some strength for them to be able to serve. So this is very important for us to know. Yeah. And that is being emphasized in the Srimad Bhagavatam because every personality who is so powerful is practically saying, I'm speaking this because I heard it from my Guru. Yeah. This is fascinating. This is practically adherence to an extraordinarily important principle. At that time, I'm going to stop with this and we'll continue again next week. At that time, when the three worlds were submerged in water, Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu was alone, lying on his bedstead, the great snake Anantha. And although he appeared to be in slumber in his own internal potency, free from the action of the external energy, his eyes were not completely closed. Yeah, so I'm going to stop with verse 10. I would elaborate on verse 10 through 30 in the next session. And if there are any questions or comments, please do pass them on now. So this is a good time for us to talk about this. Okay, I'm just going to give another 30 seconds if people are collecting the thoughts. So again, tomorrow being Gaur Purnima, as I was just wanting to summarize as you collect your thoughts, I was wanting to emphasize that the spreading of the mission of Lord Chaitanya as he desired is done by those who believe in it. And the name of Lord Chaitanya is practically being broadcast in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the teachings of Chaitanya Charitamrita. The teachings of Chaitanya Charitamrita are the fact that Krishna is everyone's Lord, the Jiva is Krishna's servant, and the chanting of Harinam is the means to the end, and is also the end. It is both the sadhana and the sadhya. So we carry that message and we pass it on. The extent to which we accept that message into our hearts, that to that extent we would become proper instruments and we will be able to execute it, for which we need to again accept the instructions of the spiritual master into our heart. So that is the whole idea of conveying this. And I was wanting to take context from Srimad Bhagavatam because there's such great adherence and to glorifying the spiritual master by saying how it was received. Nobody says that they basically received it on their own. They're practically passing on what they received from others. And these are all great personalities, which is again a proof for us to understand. Okay. Okay, there's a question on chat, so I'm just going to see what it is. Yeah, the question is that, can you let me know, despite knowing all this, what is making my progress slow? The process, the most important thing that we need to understand from the teachings of Srila Prabhupada to us is to see if we are putting all the ingredients in place. This is very important. All the ingredients in place essentially means that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to have a morning program, which includes Guru Puja. He wanted us to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, and he wanted us to practically desire to chant Premanama. The great difficulty faced by practitioners in the modern context is that we are not in the mode of goodness. We are predominated by the modes of passion and ignorance because we are dealing with the world on a day-to-day basis. We are in touch with passion and ignorance more profoundly than someone who practically existed 50 years back or 60 years or even 100 years back. So we deal with it very profoundly. And this is true, especially in the Western world, because we come in touch with passion and ignorance very profoundly. Because we come in touch with passion and ignorance, then there is a tendency to develop desires within passion and ignorance. So then we start forming plans of our future within passion and ignorance, as demonstrated by our neighbors, as demonstrated by our colleagues, as demonstrated by the advertisements, etc., whatever we are cultured to do in terms of coming in touch. Then, as we have all these desires, life becomes very complicated. And then we can't execute Krishna consciousness with a complicated life because we are already tending to complicated relationships, economic circumstances, and we are also complicated in terms of many of the challenges which we see today in terms of movement, in terms of coming in touch, etc., because of the present calamity. Now, the point which we want to make here is our first business is to understand that we need to come to the platform of goodness. Because if you come to the platform of goodness, then we have the ability to be able to move forward quite rapidly. This should be our goal. So, how does one come into the platform of goodness when they are in touch with passion and ignorance in the world? You come in touch by following what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to do. Point one, if we live in any part of the world, serving with our limbs is a must. There has to be some kind of service that we need to do on a daily basis or a weekly basis because our limbs cannot be purified without directly coming in touch with service of the Lord. So it could be any kind of service, whether it's cooking for the Lord, cleaning for the Lord, doing anything. There has to be purification of the limbs. Why? Because the limbs are in touch with passion and ignorance in the Western world more profoundly. So there has to be a lot of service that should be done if you're living outside the Dham. That's first, number one, first principle. Second is that we have to perform Guru Puja because by performing Guru Puja, one automatically places the lotus feet of the Guru on top of their head. This permeates our existence throughout the day. And because it is permeating our existence throughout the day, we have the ability to remain aloof from the mode of passion and ignorance. And we have the ability to chant them. So our progress can't be made in passion and ignorance. Our progress needs to be made in the mode of goodness, which means the platform of goodness is essential. So we need to strategize and practically move towards the mode of goodness, desiring the mode of goodness in life, which essentially means that if we have a very complicated life, we should at least start desiring that that complication go away and we have the ability to remain in the mode of goodness so that we could execute bhakti. Yeah, we should make prayers. There should be some praying that should be done for this purpose. Unless we realize what we need, we can't pray, and we need it. When the Bhagavatam says Shrunvatam Swakata Krishnaha, it also says Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu. What is this Abhadreshu? Abhadreshu is inauspiciousness. And this inauspiciousness is nothing but passion and ignorance. Because we are in touch with passion and ignorance, the Srimad Bhagavatam says, Shanvatam Swakata Krishnaha, then you have the ability to remove passion and ignorance. You have the ability to dislodge passion and ignorance because you're coming in touch with the pure message of Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis, on a regular basis. So hearing Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis is the first step because it will dislodge our connection. It would practically remove all that is contaminated, which means nashta prayeshu apatreshu. Then one has the ability to come to the mode of goodness. And from the mode of goodness, one has the ability to take off. Yeah. This is how it is. So Guru Puja, Shanvatam Swakata Krishna, hearing the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then chanting Harinam, and desiring to be in the mode of goodness. Mode of goodness desires are simply meaning we have a life and a future which is simple, where we do not need passion to manage life. Simplify life to such an extent that there is no need for passion. We can manage life with what we have. So this should be our desire. As we desire this, Krishna will make all the changes that are necessary, and he would practically bring us to the platform of understanding him and being able to further our Krishna consciousness as well. So the bottom line is desire the mode of goodness and position yourself in the mode of goodness by ensuring that there is Guru Puja and the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam that will automatically bring change because the promise of removing the modes of passion and ignorance is being made in Srimad Bhagavatam. It will remove the passion and ignorance part. Then we would have the ability to chant and we will have the ability to make very rapid progress. This is the general explanation that I want to give because there's a question which is being raised by one person, but then it applies to every one of us. So I'm giving a very general explanation. Yeah, it is very, very important for us to realize that this is also very, very general. It's very important for us to understand that. Okay. So that's what we need to do. We are practically going to remove the passion and ignorance and we will have the ability. The second point I want to make and I want to emphasize is that Krishna consciousness, and I've said this so many times, Krishna consciousness is not walking on a plain field. You are literally climbing a peak. And if you're climbing a peak, you reach a certain level, you cannot really reduce your effort or you cannot maintain the same effort. If you're scaling a peak, your effort has to increase year by year because the peak is going to get steeper as it goes along. You will receive a lot of mercy, you will receive a lot of gifts, but you need to increase efforts as well, which means that one can't really hope to penetrate the three modes of nature without intensity. Intensity means having a singular goal and a focus, and then we would be able to move forward. What most devotees don't realize in Krishna consciousness is every problem that we have will get absolutely smashed and resolved. And I'm talking about material issues, things that we feel have not been resolved. Everything will become resolved if we make the spiritual part of our life the main agenda. Make it your main agenda, and you will see that there would be something or the other which would come along, which would practically remove the obstacles and it'll be able to go forward. So this is the message as well. The point is there has to be an intensification of effort. So sometimes when we practice Krishna consciousness for some time, we feel there's been no change in consciousness. We have been practicing for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. There's been no change. That's because of the fact that A, we are making slow progress because we may not be in the mode of goodness. We may be in touch with passion and ignorance. And as a consequence, we are constantly clearing what was already cleared yesterday. So we wake up in the morning, we chant 16 rounds, we go outside, we come in touch with passion and ignorance. We again get covered by the same dust. We come back the next morning, clean it up, we again get covered. So there's some level of effort which is practically done and we're not moving much. The second part of it is the fact that there has to be some intensification of efforts where the previous year's efforts has to increase. And we have to realize that we have to have a singular goal. If you have a single goal, then you will find that there's rapid advancement. And then you will also find that a lot of issues that we face just disappear. They would just disappear. This is basically the issues that we face are in passion and ignorance. If you were to put a strata of this is where my issues are, it is passion and ignorance. you will just practically smash everything down, and you just feel that there aren't any problems as you go higher. Yeah, there's also the other fact to it. So these are the two answers. One is there has to be concerted effort, and the other is that have a desire for the mode of goodness, because that is the only way for us to be able to consolidate and bring our practices to a higher level as we move forward. Okay. How can we nicely worship the Guru Varga? Prayers, singing, bhajans. The Guru Varga is to be worshipped through both prayers and the worship of the spiritual master. This is very important. We just have to make an observation of what Srila Prabhupada gave us. Make an observation of what Srila Prabhupada gave us. He gave us the Guru Puja in the morning. We start the day with Samsara Dava prayers, that is the deity greeting. Then we come to Guru Puja at 7. We have worshipped Tulsi Maharani. Worship of Tulsi Maharani practically is required for us to even have any hope of associating with Vrindavan. If you want to associate with Vrindavan, worship Tulsi Maharani. You cannot come to Vrindavan without the mercy of Vrinda Devi. You cannot come to Vrindavan without the mercy of Tulsi Devi. So you cannot. So there is a need for us to understand that our acharyas have practically given us steps. They've given us the worship of Tulsi Devi. They've given us the worship of Gurujan, which is basically the Guru Puja. And then there is the general worship of appreciation of the spiritual master in the pastimes of the divine couple, which is the Samsara Dava prayers. Then there's again an appreciation of the spiritual master and in his personality of being able to give us the mercy so that we can understand our sambandha with Krishna, which is the 7 o'clock Shri Guru Charana Padma, which we sing, the Guru Vandana prayers. But if you combine this with lamp, incense, flowers, if you do a proper Guru Puja, you will see your problems disappear. Yeah, all kinds of problems. And I'm addressing this to everyone. I'm not basically making a statement to the person who is asking the question. I'm practically saying, if you do Guru Puja very formally with lamp, incense, flower, and everything else, you will see everything disappear. All problems will disappear because the Guru's lotus feet, if it gets implanted in our heart and he sits on top of our head giving us directions, he practically has the ability to negotiate our freedom at the highest levels of this universe and even beyond. So do not underestimate the power of the spiritual master. Do not underestimate the importance of Guru Puja. He can practically place us in a place of very great comfort for us to be able to do our bhajan. This is very important. So Guru Puja needs to be done formally with lamp, incense, flowers, etc. This is how we purify our limbs, by offering all these items as well in glorification of the spiritual master. Very, very important. And Tulsi Maharani, very important. Yeah, don't even try and estimate the glories of Srimati Tulsi Maharani, Srimati Vrinda Devi. Yeah, practically, whether it is a Vaikuntha conception of going to Vaikuntha or coming to Vraja, without her mercy, nothing is going to happen. So we also have that prayer. Different people worship her for different, I would say, understanding, but our understanding is clear. We are worshiping her to gain entry into Sri Vrindavan Dham. Any other comment or question that I can address? All right. So I think we will end today's session and then we will connect again in the following week. I wish everyone a very, very happy celebration of Gaur Purnima. But I would really, really request each and every one of you to go back to Mahaprabhu, go and in fact approach Mahaprabhu through your Gurudev. Do Guru Puja tomorrow very faithfully and request help from your Guru Maharaj on Gaur Purnima Day, because he is a representative of Lord Chaitanya. And renew the vows, because every Gaurabda we can renew the vows. This is a new year for us, for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Renew the vows, basically request him for help so that we could chant the next 1 year with greater level of focus, and we can center our entire goal in being able to follow the instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ask for things which are significant. And if you feel that you haven't made progress, tomorrow is the day for you to stand in front of the Guru and cry. You should stand in front of the Guru and cry. This is what should be done, that we haven't made any progress. I have received mercy. I've come in touch with your movement. Srila Prabhupada, I've come in touch with your movement. I've been given mercy. So many years have passed. I have made very little progress. If you want to shed tears of despondency and wanting to ask sincere help, do it tomorrow, because tomorrow, Gaur Purnima, wherever you are, depending on when Gaur Purnima is in the place, is when you receive help. So it's a great day to, basically beg for help. It's a great day. And even if you cannot cry, cry that you can't cry, basically. That's how it is done. Yeah. If you can't cry, if you don't have emotions to cry, if you don't feel desperate enough to cry, cry that you cannot cry. If you face obstacles, request the obstacles to be removed. Put forth your plea tomorrow to Gauranga Mahaprabhu. He is so munificent, and people are generally supposed to be very forthcoming on their birthdays. But Lord, Mahaprabhu is already munificent. He's Mahavadanya. You cannot imagine how munificent he is on Gaur Purnima. So put forth your pleas, because all kinds of prayers will just be heard if one sincerely makes a prayer and presents it to the lotus feet of Sriman Mahaprabhu. And be free to speak your heart to him and to Srila Prabhupada about the obstacles you face. Present it, saying, these are the obstacles we face. Be very sincere. And then Srila Prabhupada, if you can so kindly show me the way for me to be able to move forward. And then be very sincere. If you're sincere, then you would receive instructions in the heart. And then renew the vows as well for chanting. So this is a glorious day tomorrow for all kinds of being able to move forward by leaps and bounds. Okay, so wish all of you the very best. And the coming year, this is a new year for us. So may all the obstacles that we face be removed by the grace of Lord Narasimhadev, who is in the mood of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and who protects the chanters of Harinam. So in Vrindavan, it's now 7 o'clock. It's all 7 in the evening, 7:30. So it's a very appropriate time to basically glorify Lord Narasimha. But in our movement, even he comes in the mood of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Yeah, he's extraordinarily accessible, reachable, available. So that's so wonderful for us to be associated with this movement. Okay, all glories to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the festival of Gaur Purnima.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Happy Gaur Purnima to you as well, Prabhu. Encouraged to
Oh,
serve.
thank you.
Hare
Yes.
Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, and wish you best Gaurav Purnima tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
No, I want to have even better ones than the year after. So yes, I will have the best tomorrow, but I will keep the better ones for the future. Yeah.
Whatever you wish, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Very happy
Krishna,
God tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.